We will go ahead. I'm going to call the meeting to order. As with every January meeting, we have to elect officers. That's why I'm calling the meeting to order and not Marty. We can do a roll call vote if you guys want, or like nominations, whatnot, or we can make it really simple. The previous 2025 officers were Chair Bailey, Vice Chair Priscilla, and second was Joe. Unless there's any nominations to change those, someone can make a motion on that, or they can make a motion to nominate someone else. However you'd like. There are two people absent, so
Oh, we could pick on
you
them.
could pick on them.
As part of the conversation earlier. I nominate keep it the same as what it was last year. Unless
Does anybody on the current have any objection to staying on as officers, or do you want to be removed?
It's such a hard job.
It's a tough job because Marty's never here. But if you'd like to make a motion, Brian, you can make an action like I move to nominate the same officers as
nominate the same officers. Marty is chair, Priscilla is first vice chair, and Joe is second vice chair.
We have a motion. Any discussion?
You want a second?
I do need a second. You're right. Second first. Jason second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
We vote for ourselves?
Yes, because you're also voting for them. This is very informal. Any opposed? None noted. So I'll go Brian, Jason, and Marty. I will turn it back over to you.
Okay. We got the elected officers done. And public hearings, we have none scheduled.
None scheduled at this time, no.
Planning Commission matters, information presentation of new draft EOA.
Yes, and I'm going to get up to the podium and probably do this here briefly because it'll be easier. I do want to say, so I want to keep you guys informed on what's happening with this document and also let the public kind of follow along. So this presentation is a draft presentation for council. That's why it says council and why it has a 0 on the date. The draft is still being finalized. It's very similar to the old one. There's been some updates, some language changes, and the buildable lands inventory in that year we took with the last urban growth boundary expansion, things actually changed enough that it changed the buildable lands inventory to where we're looking at an increased land need. So that was important to bring forward. So with that, let me move up to the podium. So like I said, this is the draft council presentation, so I might skip through some stuff that isn't relevant to tonight because what I'm trying to do is just get an informational type presentation out there so you can see what the draft concludes. That's really the meat of this is what does the EOA going to provide. I do want to understand for people online and those in the audience and commission, so that the EOA is economic opportunities analysis, I should say that. What this does is create the land need for the next 20 years. We currently have one. It's in our comp plan. It called for land. It's 20 years old. We need to redo it. That's why we're here redoing this. These EOAs do not actually change any zoning, expand the UGB. That doesn't actually do anything other than show the justification for the need. So what this will do will actually update, have an EOA plus chapters 2 and 5 of our comprehensive plan. 2 is the zoning, 5 is the economic chapter. Those will be altered because of this updated EOA. So why are we here again? Replace this chapter 5. The EOA will basically, the whole executive summary will replace that chapter, just like it did before. And then that will show the commercial and industrial need for the next 20 years. And what we're doing with these other chapters in 2 and 5 is we're just going to update the goals and policies in those chapters to kind of reflect some of those needs. They won't change much. A lot of them are being just consolidated and pulled together, which I'll note here in a moment. Background, like I said earlier, our last comp plan was 2007. With that, we had an EOA back then that we did based on 2002 data, which we called the Bankendorf report. That went through the same type of process that we're doing today. There's a lot of new rules with the analysis today that you have to get into, but it's basically the same thing. You look at employment, you look at population, you look at growth, historics, data, and all that stuff, and you put together an analysis that says over the next 20 years, you're going to need X amount of property in order to expand. The unique thing about the way we're doing it this time is we're not just doing a blanket, we need so much ground. We're doing it based on target industries, which limits how we can expand. So we have to have a use before you actually do it. Or you expand, but it's limited to those uses that you are looking for instead of a blanket expansion. Ironically, I was looking up our old chapter is kind of calling, back then we actually called for the same amount of ground, 750 acres, that we're looking at today. And they actually had us growing faster then than they do today, which is a little odd. So some of those numbers are going to look funny when you read the entire document, but in essence, we've kind of gone full 20 years and we're back to where we started, needing about the same amount of property for the next 20 years, which is, I think, kind of unique since we're back in that era. I think Marty would remember that 04, 05, 06 era when we were really growing and booming. We kind of got back to that and it's showing the same need. So brief on the background. The one thing to note that this is an obligation from the city. This isn't something the city is like, hey, we'd really like to do this. This is a state requirement. We have to have this in our comp plan. I mean, literally, if you don't do it, eventually someone is going to sue you to do it because you have to do this in order to expand your UGB, or the state will come down and make you do it. Comprehensive plan, like I said, chapter 2, chapter 5, these goals and policies will be updated. The way I did the policies is very similar to the last few updates we did in the comp plan, housing, parks, and public facilities, where we're taking those goals and policies that we did in 2007 that were very lengthy and redundant and had a lot of statements and just stuff in there that didn't mean anything. So we've pulled out all those statements, specific tasks that isn't really a policy. The programs, there's a section of programs in there that's not really something you have in a comp plan. So we pulled those programs out. And if there was a policy that was in those programs, we moved them into its own or combined with one of the other existing policies in there. And then we just did a few little edits to those goals and policies to match the new EOA. But if you kind of do a comparison, we're basically in that, like I said, that same scenario where the city is looking for large lot industrial. That's what we were looking for back then too. After the 2004 expansion, which was mostly up on the hill and then a few areas around the outskirts of town for residential. If you read that current comp plan we have in there, there was a real focus on large lot then, which served us very well for what we have on the hill today. And now that emphasis is still continuing in this new EOA. I put this graphic in here to kind of show how these work, state goals and council goals. Those trickle down into your comprehensive plan, which go into your land use code, which is your implementing ordinance, right? And your comp plan is made of all these chapters. Chapter 2 is our zoning code. So that's why they get involved, because when you change your economic opportunities, it changes your zoning for your industrial, your commercial, gives you an opportunity to maybe make some changes or change those policies to add zones or add areas that you might want to have service in, and just change those types of activities, change your comp plan map. We're not really changing our map. We're not changing really what our zoning is. This is simply updating those goals and policies. And the economic chapter will update land use code and then allow for those UGB expansions, which of course change the comp plan map. So that's how that kind of works in a circular reference. The one thing that doing a target industry does is eventually we'll change our land use code to add what we call large lot industrial zoning. So when you do a target industry, the state has specific criteria for those target industries that you can't go outside the bounds of. So you actually create a new zone. We'll probably do it in an overlay. We're not going to do it until we actually have one created, but It's very specific restrictions on those areas you bring in. So you don't just bring it in and then somebody does whatever they want with it. So that'll be new. Go ahead, Ron.
Should we break it to him now that he's?
Yeah, Ron's now the new chair since he showed up late. So EOA, primary purpose of an EOA, like I mentioned, city zoning. So it's to justify what city zones you have. That's your chapter 2. And then it also is kind of the primary reason you expand your urban growth boundary for commercial and industrial. It's the only way you can justify those types of things. And what it does is change your comp plan, your economic chapter. It inventories commercial and industrial buildable lands. It identifies kind of an economic development potential. So it kind of looks at your history, your last 20 years, and then it kind of predicts what your next 20 years will look like, which is really hard to do, but you take your best guess. We forecast population, which is actually done through PSU and employment growth. So you'll see tables in the document when it's finalized of how that looked back in 2000 versus today. And then it estimates what that need will be for the next 20 years. And I want to reiterate, like I did when we were going through that UGB expansion last year, why we have these and why they even bother with this, because it seems kind of onerous. And why don't we just look at these things when the opportunity comes? The whole point is that the original land use system was developed to preserve farm and ranch land. So they didn't want people just expanding whenever they wanted to. They also wanted to be fair and equitable to private property owners who had property inside the urban growth boundary. So we didn't just expand and not look at their property first, right? And then we wanted to ensure land within the existing UGB is used efficiently, which goes back to that second bullet, that you're actually using those properties first before you sprawl out. So that's kind of the point of these and why they are so restrictive, and try to really make an educated guess on how much you need for those 20 years. They can always be updated with new data. So it's not something that you can't crack this thing back open if something different happens. But over that 20-year period, it's surprisingly accurate how well those predictions actually worked in the last 20 years. And so the process, I've kind of gone through this quite a bit, employment-based population growth, looking at historic population employment growth and all these things. So all this information comes in and it creates this guess on how much land you have inside your UGB and how much you need outside your UGB. And so can it fit within your existing? If it can't, how much more do you need? And that's that 20-year supply. And like I said, target industry, you literally have to pick, and I think I show it here briefly in the conclusion, you literally have to pick specific, they call NIC codes. There's these codes for manufacturing and data centers and energy production and waste management and all these different things. So we tried to throw pretty much everything in there that we feel would be utilized in our community for those target industries, primarily manufacturing and the data center activity, obviously. And then we have such a power issue that the biomass thing is still in there. That wasn't removed. It was kind of sidelined, though. It is one of the target industries in the group, though. Process. So this is just quick buildable lands. Take out the constraints, steep slopes, wetlands, floodplain, all that kind of stuff. Remove those properties from the inventory. You then remove all the public land, all the properties that are already developed. One of the unique ones that changed from the last EOA that you guys actually looked at is the Apple site. There's been so much development occurring on that lower piece that wasn't previously considered developed in the last EOA that is now considered developed. Because of that, it's increased our land need. So because that has now been increased our land need, our projected land need, because that has been removed. It's no longer vacant. It's been removed from the existing inventory. And then you end up with this map. This is your kind of buildable lands map. These are your kind of generic acreages for each. And that's your buildable lands. And when you get to that point, well, you look at, okay, are there anything in here that need to be rezoned? These 3 properties, as we mentioned before, are are in our last comp plan as being candidates for rezone. This one used to be in there. We've already rezoned that one. I think we might even add Butcher Boys when we do that, but because if you rezone these, then that creates a need to replenish it somewhere else. So that's a possibility. The idea in these areas is that they're so high and separated from the industrial below that it might lend itself more to a residential development or a mixed use than heavy industrial, putting it right next to all these homes. So that is carrying forward and is currently in our draft. And then you get to a conclusion. And I put these little boxes in here, kind of a go, no go situation. So when you get to your sufficient land for employment, because this is all about employment, it's not about how much land you need to develop. It's technically all about how much employment you need to cover your population growth, is really what it's about. It's not how people think of it, but that's why employment is so important in these documents. So commercial land, we're showing a need of 85. We have 111. So full stop, we don't need to expand for commercial. So if someone came in, that just says Exhibit 1. That's why the link didn't cuss over. So when it says error reference not found, I'll fix that. Industrial, we break it into two categories, small and large. Small industrial sites are less like Tom McCall Business Park, Alden, Murphy Court, those types of things. 25 acres or less. We're showing a need of 46. We have like 94, so full stop. We don't need to expand for small acreage. So we wouldn't expand just to subdivide it up into an industrial park. There'd be no need for that. And that would go back to hurting people that have lots already rezoned, and you wouldn't do that because you'd undercut them. And then you have your large lot sites, which is where we were showing the need. So Prineville is looking at a need of 9 industrial sites. We have 6. I will mention that some of those sites, we're having to count some of these sites that are relatively spoken for. There's some very large sites that people own. They're not selling, they're not developing. So it's kind of like just stagnant land, but we have to count them as vacant, even though we know they're not going to develop. We're even counting the stuff that we're saying going to be rezoned. So some of those 9 are actually things we might rezone or that are already going to have plans to develop that we still have to count for. So we're showing a need for 9. We have 6. That means a need for 3 sites at an average size of 251, which is 755. Literally 5 acres different than the last time we did this 20 years ago, which kind of works out because we expanded our UGB for about 600 acres since '04. So it was fairly accurate. Last time it called for 750. We did about 600. You could argue we probably could have done a little more, but so our growth rate relatively the same. They're asking for the same amount of property. The difference being is we're doing this in this target approach. So it's not like, so you actually have to have the reason to expand. You don't just go expand for whoever wants to develop anything. So the city could go out there and we could do an expansion and then have somebody come in that target area, or we can wait for an industry to come in and then do the expansion based on a specific use. But it will be limited in those target industries. That's what that local or large lot industrial zoning will create. And you notice right back here, there's a whole list of things in the actual document, just like there was before on manufacturing facilities, data centers, and biomass facility. And there's a waste management and 2 others for small business retail type stuff that serve those areas. So they're in those, when you get the actual document, it'll show the needs assessments for each one of those types of categories and what those local like limits will be, whether they need rail service, whether they need, what kind of power service do they need, that kind of where those target industries might locate. Right now, we're probably looking at most likely expansion would be up on the grade as where most of the stuff has, unless there is a very specific need for rail service. And That's where the biomass came in last time, was the need for that rail service. That's still questionable. You could still get something coming in that maybe the biomass goes on the hill. Maybe we never do it. So I know there's going to be a lot of questions over why that's still in there. It's because council wants it in there in case we have an opportunity. They did hear loud and clear that it's probably going to be an issue down the corridor on the rail side, but it doesn't mean you can't rail it in at the depot and truck it up onto the hill as an alternative. So that's still a possibility, but there's nothing actually working towards that at this moment. Right now, we're concentrating on getting this EOA done so that we even have the opportunity for some of the expansions up on the hill that we are constantly getting leads for through EDCO for 300, 600 acres, just that need. And it's manufacturing, anywhere from data centers to manufacturing to power generation. It's all constantly hitting us every month. And without this, we can't move. And so kind of the conclusion of that, kind of showing these numbers in table form, you can see that the bottom, when the needs is basically lower than the bottom, you don't need any more property. And you see the only category is that 50 plus, where the need is larger on the top than the bottom. And so that is generating that need. 755 acres and 3 sites. We also have this 109 acres of unconstrained of the area down Lamont that we could rezone and then move that 109 acres somewhere else. So it adds to the potential acreage need up to, say, 860 something. But that won't happen unless we actually rezone those areas. And then we can determine where to put those in the future. And that should be all I have on that. Yes. So does any of that not make any sense? Do you have any questions on what the city's kind of moving forward on? Any objection to what you might have seen? This is likely going to go straight to council because they've already reviewed it. So it won't go to commission for a full review, like a public hearing. It'll go straight to council. I haven't advertised it yet. We haven't even finalized the draft yet, but the conclusion is relatively the same. That's the acreage we need. We do expect someone's going to challenge it, most likely, and we'll just have to deal with those challenges of it's usually around the need. But I think we have a pretty good document that shows pretty logically that need is there. So
What's power generation?
So power generation, I should go back to that. So what we actually looked at doing is we were going to swap out this. There's a need for power, right? There is a like statewide, nationwide, there is a power issue. And so part of that biomass project was to bridge that gap between when some of these power infrastructure projects get finished, which may take 10 years. So how do you bridge the gap in that 10 years? Where do you get that power from? So part of the idea was that this facility would provide that gap, that bridge. But it doesn't necessarily need to be a biomass. It could be nuclear. It could be something else, right? That's being talked about right now at the state level. So these facilities, we actually looked at changing it to just a general category for utilities, which include every form of power generation, solar, wind, geothermal, wave energy, everything. But we don't want actually to target solar inside the UGB or wind inside the UGB. These things they take a lot of land and they don't provide any jobs really. And that's not what you really want to do in the city. So we started that direction, went, you know what, that's not going to work. There's too many uses in here we don't want to see inside the city. Some of these facilities, like a biomass, has a lot of jobs associated with it. A lot of people that work there and actually manufacture things there and do things there. That it made a little more sense to have something like that inside the city where they actually need city services versus a wind power or solar that doesn't need city services or need to be in the UGB. So we just switched it back, put the biomass facility back in there as a category. But it could be another energy source that we're just not thinking of right now. And then they could come in and argue that they're similar too. And that would be another way to do it. So, but it may never happen. It's a big lift to build a facility like that. So that's where we're at with the power. There's a lot of things coming out of PPNL with the blueprint. I think Powell Butte's been involved in that quite a bit. There's also a lot of conversations with BPA and how they're going to be, and all the solar you're seeing built around here. There's a bunch of kind of that's enough. We're done with the solar next to the highway. Put it down Milliken. So there's a lot of energy, a lot of complaints, a lot of things that are being talked about. Like I said, even the state legislature is starting to really rethink how they look at power and where we get our generation from. So it'll be interesting to see how that problem gets solved. Any other comments? Thoughts? My guess is this will probably go to council. We're getting pretty long in January, but if March, I'm probably thinking now at this point, to just get because we have to notice DLCD for 35 days. We have to notice in the newspaper and kind of get all those lined up. And then we'll do the presentation with council, public hearing, go through the ordinance process. And then once that's set, that's off to the side, and then we're ready for anything else that might come out.
So we'll be reviewing the document.
I will give you the document when it's done. The only difference is you won't be doing a public hearing to recommend to council. Because council has already gone through the process and done the review, they got your recommendation for the previous one. They've just decided to come back straight to us and not subject you to the public hearing.
We'll get a copy, but we won't be approving or making changes to it.
Correct. Now, it's very much the same document. There's not a whole lot different. The difference being is that the buildable lands inventory has changed because we had a lot more development occur in that. We had a lot of development occur in 25 and 24 that when the data collection started, we went through quite a bit, and I was able to pull out that developed property map started filling up. And so when you pull out those properties, it did change. That was one of the reasons I actually asked the council to not pass the EOA last time. Because they could have done that. They withdrew the UGB expansion, but they could have passed the EOA. I didn't want them to do that because I knew it had changed so much. We wanted to relook at it. That's why I did that in the last public hearing with the council, and they agreed to go ahead and take a relook and then bring it straight back to them. So that's how it's going to work. But relatively, the conclusion is last conclusion I think was 500 something and 2 sites. Now it's 755 and 3 sites. The general idea of is still the same. So,
Good job.
all right.
Something like the biomass were to actually go in and require a rail line, what's the possibility of bringing a rail to that location?
Well, only on Lamont, we wouldn't bring it up on the hill. That maybe, I mean, it's theoretically possible, but the cost of that would be astronomical. Each site has to get looked at separately. So a biomass facility doesn't have to be in the city. It could be in the county. It can go on industrial ground in the county. It can go inside the city, technically on industrial ground we currently have, or it can expand for that purpose. Every site needs to be evaluated for whether it can be rail served. It's all about elevation. Most sites along La Manta say that's currently zoned industrial in the county, where it's currently being gravel mined between the highway and like north of Bus Evans. That whole corridor is, yeah, and Elliott. That whole corridor is currently being mined and is all industrial in the county. It's fairly flat, would be pretty easily rail served by a spur. Anything that starts to climb over 2%, that's where you get into really long and expensive track. It has to be evaluated every time. Yeah, you have to take off way back and you have to have enough staging on top, and it gets expensive and it's not always worth it. So that's something we evaluate. Since the city owns the railroad, we actually evaluate those things separately.
I have to have equipment as well.
Yeah.
Engines.
New engines, well, the track gets wet, you can't even at 2%, it's tough to get some of those sites, and you have to have that landing up on top so you can get a full line. It's not a simple project. There are some low-level ground near the city. I think in that last expansion, we were looking at the large pivot, but we were also looking at that ground down below. And that would be easily rail served with a spur that we've done before. We actually have one currently that serves the backside of was Contact. Now it's Lexington. They have 2 spurs that go into that property, but that track's already there. So you would just do something similar to it on the other side. It's not great to cross La Manta. I mean, that wouldn't be our perfect choice. You'd like to not cross a city street or a county's road. You'd like to do it. That's why that one corridor up by between Elliott and the highway would be the easiest thing to do, because you're not crossing roads at that point. But that's for someone else to decide whether they want to do it or not. Any other questions? Complaints?
Would it do any good?
Yeah, right?
Okay, no more questions, huh?
Okay.
All right, anything the commission would like to discuss?
I was just gonna beat a dead horse that I beat periodically. Our intersections are not always conducive to traffic. They're not wide enough. They may be wide enough on paper, but they're not wide enough.
Which ones are we talking about?
Specifically, I can't remember. There's like Studebaker, for instance, but we don't have to name a specific intersection or stretch. Look at the sidewalk, look at the curbs. You have black marks on the curb, it's not wide enough. If it's one black
Right.
mark.
Or there's really bad drivers. They're questionable. Yeah.
If it's consistently being banged, then it's not wide enough.
Um,
For instance, and as the new one going into the new houses behind Ray's, it doesn't look like anybody took into account the curve of that driveway either. But that's a driveway there.
that should be all residential. Yeah, if you're pulling a truck in there,
No, well, even a trailer.
well, yeah, if you're pulling a trailer in there, you're gonna have problems too, because that's really not, there's nowhere to park that either. So those aren't really meant for that type of traffic. That'll be all, that's not a city street either. That's a, Yeah,
get that.
driveway.
That's a driveway, but you don't have to name locations. You look at the curbs. If it's been banged regularly, there's a reason for that.
anything else? I do want to
Okay.
mention, I know we have 2 people in the audience. Ken, if you have any questions,
No.
well, afterwards, I'll hang out in case you have any questions. We can go one-on-one.
Okay, director's report?
Yes, Daryl, do I do this or can you switch to Google? Didn't want to mess it up. There we go. Okay, so I like to do this because it's just easier to fly around and kind of explain kind of where people are at. If you haven't been up to the Rooster, go have a burger and a beer. That is open. Gas station should be open. Drive up should be open. I went up there Monday night. It's a pretty good place. Watch the game. So if you haven't been there, that's kind of our newer eatery. It's kind of an experiment up in that area to see how commercial works. It's the first commercial we've ever done up there, other than the old bowling alley, which technically wasn't supposed to be there. So this is just kind of look at how those service commercial areas will serve this area and see how effective it is at doing that.
The Wilsons recommended.
Yeah, it was good. Reasonable too. There is some effort. We get leads all the time for developments and such, and when you look at properties, this area right in here, in this area is kind of one of those medium lots that people are constantly looking at. We also have this industrial area here where you're seeing the little data center, 60,000 square foot data center go in right here. That's the Oppenden one. And this will eventually be a new industrial park. So I don't know when that's going to happen, but if anybody's looking, this one's getting pretty close to being finished. And we have some movement up in, actually, let me go to the 25. You can see Tom McCall is filling out pretty well. And there's several other developments. You'll see one starting down in here on this corner lot. There's a bunch of other ones that are kind of getting prepped, I guess you'd say. So our economic engine right now, as I've said in the last year, is pretty much all up here. This is where all most development and jobs are occurring. Other than, if people aren't aware, Lexington did buy the mill in Dura, which used to be Owens Corning. That was a very fast transition. It's kind of good for our community. They are immediately put 50 employees back in there, and they're going to slowly ramp up production from other areas. They're a large company, also subsidiary of another company, but they're pretty much independent. And they're going to ramp up that facility, and you're going to hopefully see it go back to its original capacity of 180 some odd employees. So that was a big change that we're hoping stays and keeps people employed. Otherwise, commercial-wise, commercial's fairly flat. You're not seeing any new commercial development. You know, we kind of built out the north end of the Ochiko lumber site, and that was our last big commercial push. We haven't really seen much since, and now we're switched back to the apartments. Those are both going up. They're starting to move fast. This weather is really helping. They're not getting frozen out. I think someone even opened a batch plant for paving recently, which is really unusual. So generally we kind of go in these cycles with commercial where the housing comes and then the commercial comes after it, and it constantly flips over. So those apartment complexes are going. This subdivision here that you did several months ago, this is the infill for Iron Horse. You're going to start seeing homes built in there. Most of them are already approved. And then this will probably be the next subdivision you look at. It's part of the Iron Horse subdivision. It was originally planned. You can see that horseshoe road. That one's probably the next. I have the construction drawings around, but that'll be the next one you guys review. And I don't know, 30 somewhat lots in there or whatnot. So that's kind of it on the housing front. Of course, this area here is continuing to build out. Parkview is pretty much done. They have a few more lots along here. So all the housing is being concentrated in this area and the apartment complexes.
Is the real estate moving?
It's picked up first of the year, things started really picking up, so. Yeah, so.
Yes, we are seeing a lot of the kind of the more low end housing builders, Lennar, Monte Vista, Hayden, some of these guys coming in and trying to undercut some of the polish homes and some of the higher end builders, which good and bad. We need both. We're going to be going through a housing analysis this year as well, which will we did it 6 years ago. We're going to do it again. That'll dictate what type of housing we need for the next 8 years, because they're doing these really quick now. The last housing analysis showed a need on the really high end and on the really low end. I expect that to happen again.
With the
So
apartment development out Madras Highway, has there been any inquiries or anybody looking at any commercial or retail development out that way?
the only one was Grocery Bandit, which you guys did the zone change for to expand here, which would be this is technically a commercial node. Other than that, I have not seen much. You'd kind of think that type of development, that many people, once they get in there, it might spur something.
That's what I was wondering.
And you might see some of this is all commercial in here. You might see some of that, move like you did on the other side of town, which would be nice to kind of clean up some of these sites.
Well, you've got that old brothers complex, be nice to.
Which is currently leased by Best Care, yeah. But it'd be nice to have that, something like that back over there, yeah, to serve that area. So other than that, got industrial, you got commercial, you got residential, public works projects. We are, for those who aren't aware, we are finishing up our ASR2 well. You're going to start seeing a building. That pipe is just sticking up out of the ground. That is a second well. We're going to start seeing a building get put up around it, very similar to what we did here with heliport. For virtually the same thing, backup generator, the whole deal. That's going to start going in here, and that'll give us a second injection and recovery well. And the only other public works project that's really going to happen, that we know is going to happen this year, is we're going to pave Main Street from Third all the way down to Lynn and fix all the drainage problems. And we're going to try to do North Main in here as well. We're still working on those drainage issues that we see at Fourth and Main. And
Jason would like that.
yeah, that drainage problem that you see at that corner, we need to fix that before we pave this street. So we're really trying to push to do some of that. And then you'll all see that the horseshoe was bought. You can see that it's getting remodeled. That is being remodeled into what's called Cadillacs. And they're wanting to redo all of their sidewalks and whatnot. So that
Are they
is,
talking about food trucks
yep.
in there?
They want to put it,
Doesn't seem that big.
it's not, I think he's going to put sites for it. He'll have at least one, maybe two. I think he wants to gear it up for 3. You know, they'll come and go like they do in every other site. He doesn't really need them. He's just trying to provide another option other than the kitchen inside. And he's going to put it kind of an awning, some garage doors will break through that wall, and he's got a whole. Did you? Yeah, it's starting to move, and he's got a plan to just clean up that whole corner and kind of make it different. He's going to keep the old horseshoe, like the sign. He's just going to change the name, so that'll remain as kind of a historic piece. I thought that was interesting. So that's kind of I guess the one commercial thing that is happening in the downtown.
Food court thing at the end of Second.
That one's still being built. I think they had money problems.
Like if progress had slowed down for a while.
Yeah, they were going really fast, and then it
They
just
didn't really
stopped.
run long
And
like-
I think they might have found they haven't told me, but I think they might have found an investor or someone else to finish it or sell it to. So they started siding it and roofing it.
Since
And
the holidays, they've moved,
Yeah.
they've started up a new clip. The,
So-
and the vet clinic,
the vet clinic on Second Street is being finished. That is here. No, Maple here.
Yeah.
So that was stuff from last year that is just now getting finished. But yeah, hopefully maybe that will have another eatery to try out here in the spring. Who knows? It's getting pretty close.
we have lots of options this time.
We're getting more and more, which kind of, that's, you hope they all make it, because there's not a whole lot of margin in those areas for money. That's why you see the lotto machine going in all the time. But
I go to Zumba class in Redmond, and most of the people who attend live in Redmond. And there's this gal that is always telling me how much they love to come to Prineville to eat because we have good restaurants and Redmond doesn't.
everybody's tired of their own stuff. Yeah,
They love Club Pioneer. They love the Blue Duck,
yeah, we do have some
Uh,
decent places.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
It's okay.
On Laughlin.
Yep.
Where that property was gonna have those 4 or 5 units on it that was gonna be developed.
Oh, this is next. It's completely evaporated as far as I can tell. I mean, that has not come back at all.
Not that one, but the one. Right
Yeah, these two, and they did the boundary adjustment, but I don't think they ever recorded anything. I mean, we approved it, but I don't think they actually recorded the deed.
For a while, they had somebody rent the house and living in it,
Yeah.
which I thought the house wasn't livable. So, but.
Yeah, I haven't seen them come back. That's been,
My daughter and son-in-law own the house right next door, so that's why I was curious.
yeah, that's been like 4, almost 5 years. I have not seen it come back. They just kind of
I
abandoned.
knew initially we approved it and then they had to change it because they had to take one unit out to make
Yep.
more parking and all that. And So we adjusted what they were doing, but I hadn't heard anything more about it or seen any activity.
Yeah, and since then I haven't either.
Okay. Interesting.
So that one is technically it's actually void. It's well past the approval date.
Mm.
So they would probably have to come back, do it again at that point. Yeah. Any other things you guys are seeing out there that you have questions on?
Something flipped through my brain, but I lost it.
What's the speed zone change?
Oh yeah, I should notice that. I'm not always privy to some of those, but there are some speed changes coming. I should have brought that on La Monta, I believe.
Yeah, it's right as you pass Ocho Lumber, there's a sign that said speed zone change coming.
Yeah.
It's
Those
only- it-
tend to be so typically like we saw the change happen last year on Third Street. It went to like just 20 miles an hour.
Yeah.
So a lot of times what we do is when things change so much to the point where we're seeing kind of issues, usually our street superintendent will submit a speed study to ODOT. And then they study, and it takes a long time.
Okay.
They study, and then all of a sudden you forget about it, and they change the speed, and you're like, why'd you do that? Well, you asked us to. So I think that's what happened here too, is this has been going on for a while, and there's new speed studies. I think it's between Harwood and Bus 7, somewhere out, not Bus 7 because it didn't connect, but out here there's going to be some reductions, I believe it is.
So once you get past the bus yard, it's 55 until you get to that next corner, then it drops down to 35.
And I think that's what's gonna change is that section.
So it's just gonna make it consistent, because you slow down, then you
You
speed back
move
up,
up.
and then you slow back
Yep.
down.
So I think they're gonna, I can't remember, our street superintendent, somebody did ask the same question. I asked him, he sent me the email. I'll find it and I'll send it to you guys, what it's supposed to be.
Some people think that's 75 through there.
Well, one of my agents is a bus driver, and she was actually stopped at the railroad tracks, and somebody passed her while she was stopped at the railroad tracks
Oof.
because they were in a hurry going down
Yeah.
that road. And it's just, but yeah, it's that variance in there where it speeds up and slows back down. If you're headed out of town, once they speed up, they're not slowing back down.
No. Yeah, and that's the same dynamic we had down in the middle of town.
They actually write a lot of citations on that, I think, because there's a lot of presence out there. A lot of police presence, deputy and city both,
Yeah.
which
and-
is good. I'm not complaining.
Yeah, I just saw the sign up recently.
Yep,
I wasn't-
that's what that's
wasn't
about.
Aware of any changes coming, so I was
Um,
wondering what was.
I'll find that in the email and send it out to you because I do have what it's gonna be.
Speaking of email, I've apparently, in one of the updates on my computers, it has eliminated itself from me being able to find it.
Is your city email? It should just be a Microsoft.
It's my system, but
Okay.
my Outlook, but it's not, whatever reason, I can't find it
You
anymore.
have to go to 365.
Yeah, so it's a,
They've changed, they did some kind of an I had it figured out and then it updated.
Yeah.
You can
have to go
always-
down to that apps.
you can always log in online through Microsoft. You don't have to use the Outlook app on your computer. You can just use the web version.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where I.
Let me know if you have any problems and we can figure it out.
I need to remember and call during the thing.
Yeah. You can call, you
I'm at home at
can call
night.
me at home. We can figure it out.
Neglect to delay, let that number out.
Since the Combs Flat loop around to Peters, has there been any kind of looking at the traffic on that?
We have not done
User-
any counts, per se, like actual tube counts. We don't actually tube count anymore. We have a beam. But that is something I think we're eventually going to do. I've noticed a large reduction in the mornings.
I was just thinking on Peters itself, as far as the connection there and everything, where it comes off there, where it comes and connects in the main there.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah. So I turn this every morning and every evening at Yellow Pine, that area. You have to pay attention now because there's cars coming at you that weren't there before, but it's a normal left turn. I think the most weight is actually this left out in the morning. You have to pay attention for that one, but it's not bad at all. The amount of time this shortened for a lot of people, especially in town, in the area of downtown, not having to go to Ray's and then go all the way back through town to go up Main Street is significant, I think, in some of those, just being able to leave and go up. I mean, I would literally think, because I live up in Northridge, I would literally think about it like, oh, do I really want to go all the way over here? Because then I'm going to have to come all the way back, and I would not do it.
I should be able to get over there.
You know?
I should be able to get there from Lamona, that's what I mean.
Yeah. Eventually, the 9th Street extension, but
Just thinking about yourself, I know.
yep. So I think it has had a positive impact. We do need to get some counts out here because we did do counts prior to, and then it would be nice to compare.
We talked about that, we changed that corner right there on that industrial property where at Peters and they.
Yep.
In anticipation that the traffic increased, we might have to do something with that intersection, and if we extended it across the other way, so.
Yes, in this intersection, you can see that line has been shifted. You can see where it has accommodates, what it can accommodate a roundabout in here and or a signal. The tracks have been removed, so the signal is no longer necessary. But I don't think this will get triggered until something happens over here.
Aren't they developing that or talking about it?
They're talking about it. I've talked with them once. I mean, from their perspective, they'd like to see how many they can get with an offset T before they build the roundabout. So basically come in here and do an intersection and just have like 2 roads coming in like that.
It's really congested.
That's gonna get,
Places, and especially if you get much truck traffic, that's really.
I don't really like that. That's what we keep asking. Well, how many can we do before? How many can we do before we need?
I don't like a roundabout, but this isn't much better.
No, the offset Ts are going to be, it works in some cases, but I think, they're probably going to come in and ask, hey, can we do 30 units? And they'll do a traffic study to say, hey, 30 units works. And then beyond that, you have to do the full intersection or something like that is what I'm expecting them to try to do. We got this right away enough initially to do the signal. And then when the mill basically said, we don't want those tracks anymore, we'll get rid of the tracks. Then we got enough to also potentially do it. We have a 60% design on a roundabout. It can go either way, but Peters Road is going to slide down and basically come into a offset, kind of an angled intersection, which is why the roundabout works probably better. The roundabout is designed for full lowboy truck traffic going north-south because Main Street is a truck route, but not those large loads going east-west is how it is right now. Because if this is going to be a neighborhood, we don't really want
Trucks going through.
major trucks going through these areas. And there's a lot of discussion.
Truck going through that'd be at a forest.
Would be what?
It'd be the forest or the park.
Yeah, so what we want them to do is come down Lamonta because we designed 10th Street for full truck movement. We want those trucks not to come through here. We want them to go down and turn at 10th and up. It's not that much further, but that's how we want them to move. And then if this becomes all residential, we wouldn't want trucks running through there anyway. So that's some of the discussion on what do we do with Peters and how do we extend this? Because it's still a major collector to move traffic. And a lot of the debate is, this section of Peters, we don't allow access, backing driveways,
Right.
backing out. And so, these guys have always argued that they want to back out onto the street. And we're kind of hesitant to do that because this is going to be here for 200 years. And it's like that traffic is just going to increase and increase and increase. So we need this to be unfettered to come through, but not necessarily for truck. So it won't be a full like Lamonta or Lynn Boulevard or Laughlin Main Street. Those are the kind of the discussions. How do we connect Peters to Gardner? What does that look like? How does that flow? And does it go down here below the track? Does it come across the top? That's kind of where we're at. So Anything else? Good of the order? No?
Nothing else, and we are scheduled for the 17th of February.
That'd be our next scheduled meeting. We may have that subdivision depending on whether they pull the trigger on it or not. But that's the only thing I know that might pop up on a public hearing at this point.
Nothing else? Ready to adjourn?
Or go.
We're adjourned.
All right, thank you.